End recording by clicking the stop button in the 3-i-exam-1.jpg 5616 times 3744 web content.
So hopefully I'm recording. There's a reason I'm using voiceover, and I'll get to why in just a second. Let me start at the beginning. Back in high school, as part of a growth spurt, as all teenagers go through, I had a bleed in my retina. And to describe what that's like, for anybody who's driven an early morning fog and had to pull over because they couldn't see their hand in front of their face, that's what that's like, except make the fog strawberry cream. That's basically what my vision was like for 2 months, was looking through a pink cloud. Now, my retinal specialist has always held the position, never, under any circumstances, do a procedure unless you have no other choice. And that's because my vision has always been stable but fragile. My vision was manually corrected through surgery when I was an infant, and that's how I'm able to see what I can today. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to see anything at all. And for the last, up until high school, everything was fine. In fact, my vision was even getting better. Then in high school, basically what ended up happening was I ended up losing my vision temporarily due to that growth spurt and that retinal bleed. One of the side effects of that bleed was the possibility of cataracts. I now have a cataract. Well, I shouldn't say now, because I've actually had one for about a year or two, but it wasn't really a concern until now. There is concern for this cataract. On a scale of 1 to 4, the doc said it was at a 3, and I said, well, we don't want to operate on it too soon. He said it's not too soon. And after having heard that, you take that and put that together with 3 out of 4, this isn't good. He said, wait until I'm done with my schooling to do the procedure. And I said, well, then I'm going to be waiting a few years. And he said, oh, because it sounds like, well, we can wait. We can't wait too long. And unfortunately, the only time that I have with enough time to effectively have a full recovery from this is over the summer. So probably this summer, we're going to get the procedure done. It's going to be a simple cataract removal. But my retinal specialist did tell me that if there was no risk, we would have had the cataract removed long ago, as in a couple years ago. That risk is possible retinal detachment as a side effect of the procedure. Now, he advised that as soon as the procedure was finished, to have my retina looked at, to see if they can reattach it, depending on if it detaches, what happens. The short end of it is, there is a chance, and I'm not saying yes or no to this, but chance that I may end up losing my vision to some degree. We don't know what's going to happen, but I will say this. If we don't operate on this cataract, then I'm going to end up eventually having a cloud in front of my face for the rest of my life. Now, a lot of people would panic. I'm not panicking because I have a thorough background in assistive technology. I've used JAWS for Windows in the past. I've used VoiceOver on iOS and on the Macintosh in the past. I've already started preparing for the possibility that something might happen. So how am I preparing? Well, you probably heard in the beginning of the video Alex's voice, the voice of the screen reader VoiceOver on the Macintosh. I'm getting a refresher course, teaching myself again how to utilize VoiceOver on the Macintosh. And it's actually it's like riding a bike. You may need to remember a couple things, refresh yourself, but in a way it's like, one of those things you never forget. But how else am I preparing? Well, I've already got mobility and orientation lessons down. I know how to use my cane. I use it pretty regularly, especially in unfamiliar environments and at night. I'm familiar with shorelining. I'm familiar with crossing the street, which I made a video about a year or two ago on this, but I want to say real quick, you can actually go take a look for that video. I can't remember off the top of my head what I call it. You'll just have to look through my videos to find it. It's got an obvious title. But basically what we were talking about in the video was, if you see somebody who's blind at a street crossing, and you're thinking, light's green for him, why doesn't he go? Don't push him, okay? Don't put, because there's a chance that he may have just arrived. You never, under any circumstances, as somebody with vision loss, want to cross on a stale green. You always want to wait for a fresh green, because with those stale greens, if the light's been green for a long time, you don't know if somebody's going to be barreling around that corner at 50 miles an hour trying to make it through when nobody's looking, and bam. So if anybody out there sees somebody who's blind and they haven't started crossing already and they've got a green light, just give them some patience. Maybe they're waiting for the next cycle. Okay? Just be patient with them, I mean. So I've got my orientation and mobility down. I'm familiar with the escort service at my university, in case I may need that. I'm familiar with the paratransit service. I'm familiar with apps like Lyft and Uber. I've used Lyft. I haven't really used Uber, but I could probably see about reinstating my account. I decided to get rid of Uber because of the, shall we say, questionable behavior of some of their... yeah, I'm not going to go into that. But I want to see, I'm going to check and see if Lyft is accessible. Like I said, paratransit, the taxi service, I'm already well familiar with the taxi service. So it's not like I'm not prepared. I may need to get additional resources from my Disability Resource Center if I continue with my classwork. And I say if because I've got some other family members who are having health problems, and I won't go into that. But I may have to take, I don't know. But let's put it this way. Basically, I'm prepared. So I've started creating a shopping list on Amazon, and I'm looking at possible technologies. How do I mean? Check this out. So one of them is a Braille Watch. It's actually a nice Braille Watch. It's a chrome watch with a polished finish, chrome expansion band. It's a regular everyday quartz movement. And I had a Braille Watch, but one of my family members wanted to perform some band maintenance on it with the strap, and they accidentally broke the hinge for the door. For those of you who have not really seen how a Braille Watch works, you probably see the cover in front of you. That cover has a ridge at the 6 o'clock position. You open that up, and then the person can feel with their fingers what time it is. In the case with this particular watch, I really like it because there's a big circle for the hours and a little circle for the minutes on the end of each hand. So that's really, really nice. And I love the styling. It's black. It's a black dial with chrome hands and a chrome bezel and band. I just think it looks really nice. And it's not too expensive. It's $40. So there's that.
00155, press 00155.
As somebody who grew up with handwriting, I and also hand wrote while I was blind. I know both Braille and handwriting. And there are still reasons for you to need handwriting these days. Greeting cards around Christmas, taxes, things. But there's all kinds of writing guides out there. There's a check writing guide. There's an envelope writing guide. This set even has a greeting card writing guide. So it's basically what happens is I would line up the guide with the envelope, and there are cutouts that show me where to write. So I'm not in a negative position there.
6. DDLM dash Pro. Press 6. D.
Speaking of writing, I mentioned that I have had experience with Braille ever since I was a wee one. Well, that's good because this is a Braille labeler. You probably see the tape sticking out of the left-hand side. What I can do is I can just write my label, press the button, it prints onto an adhesive, tear off the adhesive, and stick it on stuff. So that's fantastic. I really like the design because there's a much cheaper Braille labeler at $40, but it's one of those deals where you have to rotate the thing around and you have to select each letter at a time. And from what I could tell, it's probably an uncontracted Braille, and I want to make it a point. See, I know Braille, and I've been typing in contracted Braille whenever I've been practicing or trying to, and I want to try to get it to a point where I can read contracted Braille on a regular basis. Like, for instance, one of the words that I know off the top of my head, two of the words that I know off the top of my head are open, O-P, and then the E-N sign, and then main, M-A, and the I-N sign. And why is that important? Elevators. I've gotten to the habit of the instant I get into an elevator, I'll turn around and take a look at the Braille writing to see what floor I need to be on, just in case something like what I was talking about at the beginning of the video should ever happen. This Braille labeler is really neat though because it runs on 4 AA batteries. You just type it out, type up your label, you hit print, you print out. It'll print out the label for you. You stick it on the adhesive. You stick it on to anything. So that's really, really great. I would definitely make use of this. The only problem is that it's $700, but I honestly think it's worth the price. But yeah. So basically, this is just an example. I'm ready, if something should happen. So the Braille labeler, that's one thing. This is the 6-dot adhesive Braille labeler. It's available at Rehab Mart. So, but it's not cheap. It's $500 and something, which for a labeler is, quite expensive, but you're going to find that all the time in this market because there's a very, very small fraction of people who are blind who would need something like this. Compared to the rest of the world, the numbers are very, very small. So the ROI, return on investment from a business standpoint, is very low.
61W7H69B4L.
One of the things that I'm already very glad for is my Amazon Tap. Alexa, volume 6. Alexa, time.
The time is 6:35 p.m.
Alexa, volume 4. So just like that, I have access to my music, my news, my weather. I can set multiple alarms. This is a great alarm clock because you never need to set it. And the fact that it doesn't have a screen, and I just listen for that little audio cue after I say the wake word, I just listen for that little audio cue and then give my command. You don't need to be able to see to use this thing, and that's one of the reasons I absolutely love it. So that's another way. This can act as a talking clock, timer, news aggregator, weather, music player, book reader, just a whole lot of things. So this is great. Even package tracker, because I am a regular consumer on Amazon, so I can ask my Amazon Tap, where my stuff is, and she'll tell me. The only problem is that if there's a delivery window, she'll give me the absolute latest delivery date. One of the items that I ordered from the UK recently, in the last couple of months, they actually had it as still being out shipping when it was actually sitting over on my nightstand. So it's not perfect, but it's definitely a usable system.
Reading web content. Elbe Rail 2, small.png, 500x327, web content.
So this is one of the coolest things since sliced bread. Take a look at my YouTube channel for a video called Braille and Speak. The Braille and Speak can be thought of as the 486 of portable computers for the blind. From then on, we had devices like the PackMate and the Braille Note line. All of these had similar limitations in that, with the exception of the PackMate, you were limited to whatever app was pre-installed. You couldn't really install your own apps, and you were cut off from the mainstream world. But on the upside, everything that it did have, it did really well. Well, the PackMate was a breaking the mold in terms of what we call the quote-unquote note-taker market. And the reason we call them note-takers is because, well, that was their primary purpose, was taking notes in classrooms and meetings and that sort of thing. The PackMate ran Windows Pocket PC 2003 and later on Windows Mobile 6 with the JAWS for Windows screen reader on top. It was a keyboard, speech, and Braille-driven mobile device that was literally a pocket PC. If you hooked up an external monitor to the device and you disabled speech, the sighted user wouldn't know the difference. Well, they've done it again. This time, they've collaborated. The people behind the PackMate Freedom Scientific have collaborated with an outfit called Elite Group in Russia. This was a design collaboration between them. Excuse me. For those of you who can see, you probably recognize the Braille display that's on this device. It's the Focus 14 Blue. It's an off-the-shelf Focus 14 Blue. The shell surrounding it is the guts of what are the guts of what is a full.
Small.png 500 times 327 web content.
Excuse me. It is a full Windows 10 computer. It runs an Intel Atom X5, 1.86 gigahertz quad core, 2 gigs of RAM, 160 gigabyte internal flash storage, 256 gig expandable with SD card, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, stereo speakers. It is literally an off-the-shelf Windows 10 computer, preloaded with JAWS and coupled to a Braille display and a Braille keyboard. But it has a couple of extra perks. There's an internal GPS receiver, and you're thinking, well, why would you want a computer with a GPS receiver? As somebody who is blind, people want to get around, and GPS has actually been one of the greatest navigation aids since sliced bread. You use a device with GPS in conjunction with your dog guide, and voila, I mean, it's just fantastic. At the moment, the receiver is not enabled in the software, but there's another thing. See, these devices are not cheap. The Braille and Speak back in the day was about $1,500, what would be about $3,000 in today's money. The pricing for the Elbe Rail, which is this device's name, is the Elbe Rail, hasn't been announced yet, but I would suspect it to be around $2,000 to $3,000 because you're getting what is literally a full Windows 10 computer with a JAWS for Windows screen reading license because it comes pre-installed with JAWS. It also comes pre-installed with a 4G LTE modem. So this can actually be, and they're working on the software right now to finish this portion off, but this can actually be literally a full desktop computer replacement with GPS and a cell phone. You can actually make calls and texts from this thing. And like I said, this is literally a full Windows 10 computer. So you just have to ask if your colleague or your friend asks, have you seen such and such app? You don't need to wonder. You don't need to say, well, my device can't run it. You can just go to the Windows Store and look around and find the app and see, hey, maybe there's something, as long as it's accessible with JAWS, it'll run on this. And this is, like I told you, this is literally Windows 10, full off-the-shelf Windows 10. The internal specs may be a bit but you have to remember, this is primarily for people who don't have any usable vision to the effect that they are able to use large print, because there are people who are blind who have usable vision who find it difficult to read computer screens due to eye strain, headaches. Same thing with print material. So it's actually very rare that somebody who's blind who would actually see complete darkness. It does happen, but it doesn't happen too much in the grand scheme of things, I mean. But no, this is literally, there is no screen. The screen is in the form of this collection of dots down here at the bottom. That is your refreshable Braille display. That is your screen. This thing has a 10,000 milliampere hour battery. Now, why would you want that? Well, in the note-taker world, you're expecting at least 17 to 20 hours of battery life, because we want to be able to turn this on, take our notes, turn it off, and go, and not have to worry so much about the device. We want to focus on the content. We want to focus on the productivity aspect, kind of like what Steve Jobs had pioneered in terms of design with the Macintosh. You know, get the technology out of the way and let the content be the star, basically. That's why these note takers have such great battery life, is the fact that they've got big batteries and they've got no screen. It's all speech or Braille. So they've got phenomenal battery life. That said, this being a Windows 10 computer, it has all the accoutrements you'd expect. USB, HDMI, I think it has HDMI. So you could hook it up to a monitor, and you could hook it up to a mouse and keyboard, and somebody who is sighted wouldn't need to know a thing about JAWS, wouldn't need to know a thing about screen reading. You could actually turn off JAWS while they run your computer and, you know, help you out with something. So this is literally, this is fantastic. This is a mainstream off-the-shelf computer that has been built with the blind in mind. And why am I looking at this, you ask? Because my Macintosh is running beautifully, but I do like the idea of having an all-in-one solution, because sometimes Bluetooth can be hit or miss, and you don't have to worry about charging two devices. So that's one option that I'm very excited about. Another option is the Braille Note Touch. Now, the Braille Note Touch, like the Elbe Rail, is an off-the-shelf mainstream device. How so? Go to any electronics store that would carry low-budget 7-inch tablets that run Android, or even mid-level 7-inch tablets that run Android. That's what this is. This is a 7-inch tablet that runs Android. Now, like Android, you would have skins over the top, right? You got LG UX, you've got MIUI from Xiaomi, you've got TouchWiz from Samsung, just all kinds of skins. Well, in this case, there's a skin too. It's called Keysoft, and Keysoft has been built for Android in such a way that this is a mainstream Android tablet with built-in accessibility over the top. And the beautiful part is, if you're an Android developer and you're watching this, you don't need any additional expertise on this kind of technology to get your app to work. As long as it follows Google's open accessibility framework, then Keysoft and the Braille Note Touch, which is what this is called, will handle the device, will handle this, your app beautifully. So basically it comes down to a choice of operating system. And if I were to go for a full system, I would honestly probably want to go with the I'd probably want to go with the Elbe Rail, because it's literally a full Windows computer. And as such, it can do full Windows computer things. And by that, I mean it's not limited by mobile apps. If I wanted to run iTunes, for example, I could do that. If I wanted to run Amazon Music, I could do that. If I wanted to run full Microsoft Office, I could do that. Okay, where am I? Hang on. I've lost my place.
VoiceOver on Chrome. Elbe Rail 2, small.png, 500 times 327, window, Elbe Rail 2, close button. Minimize button. Full screen button. Free dash I dash exam dash 0 Elbe Rail 2. Braille no touch top angle.
There we go.
Press Braille no touch top angle blue screen 2K.jpg.
Whereas this runs Google Android, and as such, you're kind of restricted to the mobile apps. And the problem with that is that the tablet environment for mobile apps has been kind of hit and miss. In fact, as I understand, it's been shrinking for Android. Plus, you need to take a look at the user market. The majority of the people who are going to be buying this equipment are in the education sector. They want something, therefore, that just works. Much like I was telling you with the Elbe Rail, JAWS for Windows, they even have a built-in talking recovery menu in case you have a blue screen of death. It is Windows, after all. With the Braille Note, in order to get that same out-of-the-box Just Works feel, they built Keysoft on top of Android 4.4 KitKat. Not that there's any problem with that, but you don't get the same kind of app permission control that you do on newer versions of Android, which I honestly hope they upgrade to at least Marshmallow pretty soon. I'm just not comfortable running KitKat. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I'd prefer to have more beefed up security. So those are two options I'm looking at. And the reason I'm looking at the Elbe Rail more closely, though, is because if I needed a new laptop or a new note-taking solution, I honestly would like to have a full computer that would be able to handle things without a problem. Whereas with the Braille Note, again, you're limited to, and it's not a fault of Keysoft, and it's not a fault of Humanware. It's just the fact that Android itself, you're limited to the mobile ecosystem, which sometimes can hamper on your productivity a little bit, depending on what your needs are. So those are two other options.
Close button. Braille no touch top angle yoga and meditation button. Hamster care button. And apps button. Toolbar. Switch person button. New tab button. Tracker-gps-lrg.jpg. Orbit-reader-w-callouts.jpg. 8 settings. Press orbit-reader-w-callouts.
So another option is to keep what I currently have, and buy this. This is the Orbit Reader 20. It is not out yet, but it's supposed to be the first under $1,000 refreshable 20-cell Braille display available, and it's very slim in terms of what it can do. It can act as a Braille terminal, so it can act as a display and keyboard for technology I already have that has screen access software built into it. But it also acts as basically a Kindle minus the Wi-Fi. And by that I mean it only does one thing, and that is read material. That's it. That's all it does. It acts as a Braille terminal and it acts as a Braille reader. That's it. And it also can act as a Braille composer. But the Braille composition aspects, again, are very limited. There's no editing software. There's no autocorrect. It's very, very basic. It actually kind of reminds me of my old Braille and Speak, which didn't even have spell check. That's basically what we're looking at with the Orbit Reader. But on the upside, it is cheaper. But then again, you have that issue that I talked about earlier on about whether or not I want to try to keep two devices charged. The connection could sometimes falter. Things happen. You know, it's not a guaranteed thing. In fact, I remember there was one Bluetooth device that I remember having major problems with, and I don't remember what it was. So that's another thing that I'm looking at. And there's the one last item, and that is the Trekker. What is it? The Trekker is a one-handed talking GPS. It is not cheap. It is $800. There's another option on the market for $500 that off the top of my head, I can't remember what it's called. But there are two options. There's this and there's that other one for the blindness talking GPS. Like I was saying at the beginning, the GPS is a godsend for people who are blind in terms of getting around. I just wish that there was a more universal standard, because you ask for a university map. What'll that map be in? Probably PDF. PDFs and screen readers are like oil and water. They suck, especially with graphics. It's bad. Now keep in mind that I'm not a regular screen reader user. If something ends up happening from this procedure, I may end up becoming one. But in my experience, I hadn't really had good luck with scanned-in PDFs, because all the screen reader does is see that as an image. Well, there's got to be a way. I honestly think there needs to be a way where you could take a PDF of a map, insert it into something like this, and have it converted, or maybe run it through some third-party software and have it converted into a format that this device can understand. And you could load up a map of a university and be able to navigate that way. I think that we need something like that. But basically, that's where I am. So that's what's coming down the pike. I will definitely keep you guys posted, but I just wanted to show you guys that I am more than well prepared to deal with this. Am I 100%? Nothing's ever 100%, and I'm going to be willing to ask for help when I need it from the appropriate people and resources. But I do have a leg up on this, so whatever happens, happens. Thank you for watching. Comments are welcome, and have a nice day.